among women. And while this is a shared characteristic among the unemployed in the OPT, the East Jerusalem's labor market is especially characterized by having one of the lowest female labor force participation rate. In 2014, the labor force participation rate in East Jerusalem for women was 7%, compared with 19% in the West Bank and 20% in the Gaza Strip. In Egypt, it was almost 50%. Other socioeconomic issues in East Jerusalem, and Ahmed Ruwaidi alluded to them, acute housing deficiency. A married couple needs around $30,000 just to get a permit to build a 100-meter square apartment. Other issues include the high cost of living, lack of investment and economic infrastructure, erosion of the productive capacity of the Palestinian economy, depleted commercial sector, dilapidated educational and health services, high dropout rates, and drug issues. Even the tourism sector, which could fuel the very limited development possible under occupation, is functioning below its potential. So having said that, what are the development frameworks currently promoted in East Jerusalem? So for the PA, East Jerusalem is officially presented as the capital of the state of Palestine and one of the 3 development priority areas besides Area C and the Gaza Strip. However, in clear divergence from its rhetoric, the PA planned to allocate only 0.44% of its budget to the Ministry of Jerusalem Affairs and the Jerusalem Governorate in 2015. Compare this budget allocation to the supposed capital of the State of Palestine, with 27% of the budget being allocated to the security sector in the same year. Moreover, East Jerusalem was absent in the PA's National Development Plan for 2014-2016. The plan only refers back to the Strategic Multi-Sector Development Plan, which Ahmed Ruwaidi was talking about, but this plan was issued in 2010 and clearly requires updating. More significantly, the development approach used in the plan seems to reduce the Palestinian struggle to that of survival instead of freedom, and seems to take the Israeli occupation as given. As the introductory section of the plan put it, and I'm quoting here, "How can the PLO assist Jerusalemites to survive and thrive within the existing context in order to have a solid foundation for the capital of the future Palestinian state?" End of quote. This lack of genuine official interest in the city, the emergence of Ramallah as the de facto capital, and the absence of a Palestinian political leadership in Jerusalem have left Palestinians feeling abandoned and resentful towards the PA. Meanwhile, Israel is planning on how to make its vision of Greater Jerusalem a reality. As Edward Said said in 1995, I'm quoting, "It was only by first projecting an idea of Jerusalem that Israel could then proceed to the changes on the ground, which would then correspond to the images and projections." End of quote. So what is Israel's projection for Jerusalem? Well, the basis for the 2020 and 2050 visions of Jerusalem, visions which are built on Judaization and further Palestinian dispossession, are 3 Israeli master plans for the city, 2 of which are little known to the public, and these are they will be analyzed in a forthcoming Al-Shabaka policy brief. In these plans, development is being instrumentalized to build Jerusalem as a Jewish-only tourism and high-tech center with minimal presence of Palestinians. The best known of these plans is the 2020 Master Plan, and several speakers alluded to it yesterday. It is the first comprehensive and detailed spatial plan for both East and West Jerusalem and was published in August 2004. The plan uses urban planning as a strategic and a geopolitical tool to tighten its grip over Jerusalem and constrain the urban expansion of Palestinians. in an effort to Judaize the city. And although the plan has not been validated yet, as it was not deposited for public review, Israeli authorities are implementing its vision and its essence. The least known is the Marom Plan. It's a government-commissioned plan for the development of Jerusalem, which focuses on 3 main areas of development: tourism, biotechnology and bioindustry, and academia. The goal is to build Jerusalem as a leading academic city. The plan will be implemented by the Jerusalem Development Authority, which produces plans for the economic development of Jerusalem, and it will also be implemented by the Jerusalem Institute of Israeli Studies. It's an Israeli think tank which is conducting the consultation, research, and monitoring for the plan. Another very important and not very well-known development plan is the Jerusalem 5800 plan, also known as Jerusalem 2050. It's a private initiative founded by Kevin Burmeister, an Australian technology innovator and real estate investor. The plan provides a vision and projected proposals for Jerusalem up to the year 2050. It is thus represented as, I'm quoting, a transformational master plan for Jerusalem that can be implemented together with other municipal plans. And so you can see how there are many development and actors and players, including the private sector, the public sector, and think tanks. And all these plans in general are reflective of the nature of Jerusalem as a colonial city and are used by Israeli authorities as a political tool to Judaize Jerusalem, that is, ensure and expand Jewish territorial, demographic, economic control over the city. Et c'est pas la peine d'utiliser le PowerPoint. Merci. So it is within this context that one should read the current uprising that has been undergoing in Palestine since the beginning of October 2015. The driving force behind the uprising is the youth, who are leading the protests without necessarily being affiliated with a political faction. These youth are expressing their disgruntlement with the Israeli occupation. The root cause of the original violence by Israel and the reactive violence by Palestinians is Israel's system of injustice and discrimination and the complicity of world powers and international companies in maintaining this system. So Palestinian clashes with Israeli Jews should be seen as acts of resistance and desperation within the larger historical struggle of Palestinians against ethnic cleansing, land theft, dispossession, forced displacement, and economic marginalization. These attacks are also a product of the heightened frustration of Palestinians with the international community and the growing sense of abandonment at the regional and international level. Palestinian youth are also expressing their disenchantment with the Palestinian leadership. In fact, the huge leadership and institutional vacuum in East Jerusalem has only left Palestinians powerless. So against this background, what kind of development do we need in Palestine and in East Jerusalem in particular? The prevailing approach to development in Palestine, whether by the Palestinian Authority or the international community, has been apolitical. Development is usually disconnected from Palestine's historical context, colonial realities, and the network of power relations. The Israeli occupation is very often taken as an exogenous variable and as a fact on the ground. So many development projects have so far been occupation circumventing projects that do not address the root cause of the problem. However, it is vital to revisit this development approach and think of other forms of development that would help us attain our goals being achieving freedom, justice, and dignity. By rethinking development in relation to our liberation struggle, development becomes an economic, political, and social process of resistance against Israel's settler colonial regime, which is the root cause of the deteriorating socioeconomic and political conditions. Seen in this light, development becomes embedded in the larger historical struggle of Palestinians for self-determination and freedom. And development is thus a strategy that resists the hegemonic power structures used by Israel to dominate Palestinians. Within this new framework for development, what is needed is a proactive Palestinian leadership that will propel the status of Jerusalem to the forefront of government commitment and to the heart of the national struggle as a matter of urgency. It is also important to hold an internal debate and project a clear vision and an operational strategy for Jerusalem. Practical and detailed steps should be identified to counter Israel's Judaization policies, strengthen the economy of East Jerusalem, enhance its productive capacity, and decrease its dependence on the Israeli economy. So some steps that should be taken, and I don't have enough time, so I'm going to be very quick. Sorry. So Ahmed talked about the promotion of tourism in general. I just want to emphasize that it's very important to promote domestic tourism. The tourism sector can fuel the limited economic development possible under occupation, but it's also very important to strengthen the political, economic, and social links between East Jerusalem and the rest of the occupied Palestinian territories. The Islamic tourism campaign you mentioned is very important, but we can also have another strategy based on developing community-based tourism by making Jerusalemites the leaders of the tourism sector. It's also very important to devise a national employment strategy, especially for the youth, given the very high unemployment rates in East Jerusalem. The development of a coordinated media strategy to raise Palestinian voices, challenge Israel's discursive power and its dehistoricized representation of Jerusalem is very important as well. Academics and policy analysts also have a vital role to play by putting Jerusalem in the vanguard. There's a dearth of research and reliable data on the socioeconomic development of East Jerusalem. Future research should also move beyond diagnosis of problems to devise creative solutions within a proactive rather than a reactive approach. There is also an urgent need to bridge the gap between academics and policymakers to ensure that all efforts are united towards the objective of achieving self-determination, dignity, freedom, and justice. But what about the international community? Well, it was mentioned at several points yesterday that the international community has a responsibility to translate its rhetoric into action and hold Israel accountable for its occupation and violation of human rights. Under international law, third states are obliged not to recognize as lawful an illegal situation and to cooperate to ensure the compliance by Israel with international humanitarian law. The United Nations Human Rights Council or Security Council could be used as a platform to do advocacy, expose Israeli policies in East Jerusalem, and remind the international community of its legal obligations. The UN could also be asked to establish a register of Israeli violations of human rights and the damage incurred by Palestinians, whether in East Jerusalem or in the rest of Palestine. And here the Organization of Islamic Cooperation could play an important role in lobbying the EU and the UN to do so. More advocacy and campaigning should also be done at the regional and international level while ensuring coordination with the Palestinian diaspora. More efforts should be made to reach out to Latin American countries, the BRICS, as well as countries that have already shown solidarity with Palestinians, such as Sweden. So in conclusion, I would just like to say that if international law were applied, none of us would be here today talking about the occupation and the violation of human rights in East Jerusalem. Thank you.
Au nom du comité. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank you, Madam Arafeh, and thank you for the quality of your presentation. You have talked about the fact that just a few months ago, last September, the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals program was adopted. And one may well ask how this program can be used to serve Palestine and East Jerusalem in particular, help East Jerusalem become a resilient, inclusive city for all. But at the end of the month, this month, in Stockholm, the committee is organizing another conference like this. And more specifically, it's going to be about Palestine in the 2030, within the context of the 2030 development agenda. I'm talking about these famous sustainable development goals. But let me now give the floor to Madame Lubna Shaheen. Madame Lubna Shaheen is a project manager and a senior urban planner at UN Habitat Palestine office. She's in charge of UN Habitat's programs in East Jerusalem that provide urban planning support to the Palestinian communities in the city. She took the lead on the development of UN Habitat's report, which is entitled Right to Develop, Planning Palestinian Communities in East Jerusalem. Ms. Shaheen also worked as an assistant professor at the Department of Architectural Engineering at Birzeit University in Palestine, and as a consultant and senior planner with local and international consulting firms. She's also conducted several research projects focusing on promoting sustainable urban development in Palestinian cities. Ms. Lubna Shaheen was at Quito several months ago. What have you got to tell us? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the beginning, allow me to thank the organizers of this conference for this opportunity to shed the light on the daily challenges that we're facing in East Jerusalem and all the people who are living there. Yesterday and today we heard a lot about the challenges. Today I will focus on the urban planning challenges in East Jerusalem and give you some examples from the United Nations Human Settlement Program's interventions that in general it aims to support the resilience of the Palestinian communities in the city. Already my colleagues this morning has highlighted lots of the challenges that face the city. I will give you just a quick overview on a few issues and then move to the programs that UN Habitat is implementing in East Jerusalem. Slide, please. Next. So when we look about in urban planning and urban development in East Jerusalem, as was mentioned, it is all regulated and managed by the Israeli Jerusalem municipality, which imposes restrictive zoning and construction policies in the Palestinian neighborhoods. And in terms of basic services and access to land, they are unequally distributed between the Palestinians and Israelis. So for instance, Palestinians receive less than 200 building permits per year out of 1,100 permits needed to satisfy the annual housing demands. Also, around 30%, and that's what my colleague Ahmed has highlighted this morning, of the Palestinian homes are considered illegal, and they face demolition threats for being constructed without building permits, which is also very hard for individuals to attain. Currently, the Palestinian neighborhoods in East Jerusalem are overcrowded, suffer from huge neglect and inadequate infrastructure. And many of the Palestinian homes are in urgent needs for rehabilitation work to have a good living environment. Next, please. Next slide. Thank you. In terms of urban planning challenges in East Jerusalem, over 1/3 of East Jerusalem has been expropriated for the construction of the Israeli settlements, and that's of course in violating the international law, as we saw yesterday in the presentations as well. And only 13% of East Jerusalem land is allocated for Palestinian development. Most of it is already developed. Now, around 50% of East Jerusalem is allocated for green areas and public infrastructures where no Palestinian construction is allowed. And in a minute, I'll show you like a figure, an illustration to see like how little is the land available for Palestinians. There's a strict zoning in Palestinian neighborhoods with limited construction densities and prohibitive costs to obtain building permits. So for instance, like to obtain a building permit, like for like a 200 square meters building, the cost can range between $12,000 to $46,000, of course, depending on the area. Next, please. Next slide. Thank you, and next. The next one, please. So as you can see here in the illustration, like the small piece, like in yellow, is like 13% out of like the total like 70 square kilometers of East Jerusalem that is allowed for Palestinian construction, and that even like fully constructed. So, and this is of course according to the Jerusalem 2000 plan. This is like the land designations, which again limits the amount of land allocated for Palestinian construction. Next, please. So yesterday, the colleagues also mentioned the Israeli policies to control the demographic balance in Jerusalem that favors the Israelis. And in terms of planning, we can see how like demography in the city is shaping the geography of East Jerusalem since 1967. Next, please. And that's like by confiscating the land to build the Israeli settlements. Next, because yeah, and next. Yeah, and you see here, like over the time, how like the Israeli settlements are encroaching inside like East Jerusalem, limiting the possible like expansion of the Palestinian neighborhoods. Okay, next, please. Next, thank you. And also here, if you look at this like figure, we can also see like the inequalities and the discrepancies between the Palestinians and Israelis, as well as the settlers in East Jerusalem. And it is very clear that when it comes to basic infrastructure and services, as well as housing density and municipal expenditures, so you can see how like the Palestinians are discriminated and they don't receive any services. Next, please. The inequalities is also clear in terms of the number of building permits issued and building units constructed for the Palestinians and compared like to those for the Israelis. So if we look at the increase in the Palestinian built-up area in Jerusalem since 1967 in relation to the increase of population, we see that it is not proportional compared to the Israeli one. Next, please. And this shows like the discrepancies also and the need for development for the Palestinians. Within this complex, next please, within this complex and, oh, okay, next please. And this also shows here like the discrepancies in the density and allowed density compared between the Palestinian neighborhoods and the Israeli settlements. Next please. And here we see like much higher built-up ratios are allowed for the settlements. And that's like meaning giving more building rights for the Israeli settlements compared to the Palestinian residents in East Jerusalem. Next, please. So within this complex and unjust situation, the different UN agencies who are now acting in the occupied Palestinian territories have identified three main strategies for their engagements in East Jerusalem. The first strategy focuses on the provision of humanitarian assistance and the protection of vulnerable Palestinian population, whereas the second strategy focuses on providing support towards a strengthened physical, socioeconomic, and cultural Palestinian presence in East Jerusalem as an integral part of the occupied Palestinian territories. And the third one focuses on advocacy and mediation within the framework of the UN resolutions and positions to promote the rights of Palestinians in East Jerusalem and to preserve the Palestinian character in the city. So, next please. Based on these strategies, the different UN agencies have identified 5 key areas needed for intervention, which focus on the need to protect the rights of Palestinian residents in East Jerusalem in accordance with international humanitarian law and international humanitarian rights, to revitalize the economy in East Jerusalem, to ensure access to essential services, to restore the Palestinian planning process in East Jerusalem, and to focus on advocacy. Next, please. For UN Habitat, Special Human Settlements Program for Palestinian people, its operations mainly focuses on planning, land and housing issues, as well as addressing the need of the vulnerable community. Next, please. So, UN Habitat, during the last 5 years, and this is literally like a small intervention, a small attempt to help as much as possible, have implemented several programs that in general aims at supporting the resilience of the Palestinian people in the city. So, next please. So for instance, like one of the programs is the Urban Planning Support Program that focus on supporting the Palestinian communities in securing tangible development opportunities and rights through spatial planning solutions, and help to generate pragmatic planning solutions to address various urban challenges in Palestinian neighborhoods, such as the realization of illegal constructions, facilitate access to building permits, and creation of public space. And also it worked on enhancing urban awareness and capacity to plan of Palestinian professionals and residents. This program, of course, and all of the UN Habitats like programs are implemented jointly with local NGOs and civil society organizations and in coordination with like the Palestinian Authority. And we have with us here like Dr. Ram.